Yes, so we have apologies from Councillor Paul Heinrich, Councillor Nigel Housden, Councillor Adam Varley and Councillor Emma Spagnola.
Try this one. Here we go. Yeah. Thank you for that. Substitutes.
Yes, we have Councillor Pierre Boutikofer for Councillor Paul Heinrich.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Any public questions or statements?
None received.
Okay, thank you. Item 4 is the minutes of the last meeting held on the 16th of June. If we go through them for accuracy, please. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. I see no hands raised, so can I take it then that you will accept those as a fair and accurate record and I should sign them as such? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Item 5, any items of urgent business? I'm not aware of any.
None received.
Thank you. Number 6, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? And we've got the page there which guides us through those. Any to declare today? No, thank you very much. Item 7, petitions from members of the public. I'm not aware of any.
None received.
Thank you. Number 8, consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member. Again, I'm not aware of any.
Again, none received.
Thank you. Responses of the council or the cabinet to the committee reports recommendations.
Yeah, just to note that at the July cabinet meeting, there was a general acceptance of the recommendation to consider the resourcing of the planning enforcement team. So as far as I'm aware, that's still under active consideration. I don't think we have an answer one way or another as to whether there's going to be additional resource yet. I should note at this point, there's also been from the portfolio holder, he's in the process of arranging a briefing on the enforcement process. So you'll hear about that in due course.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that? No, thank you. Turning to item 10 then, the Sheringham Leisure Centre project update. Councillor Gay.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you. I had hoped to come before you with more welcome news this morning, Chairman.
I'm having difficulty hearing you at the moment.
How about if I move that down a bit?
That's a little bit better.
I always forget how short I am. Thank you, Chairman. I had hoped to come before you with more welcome news this morning, but as you will see from your papers, the completion date for the new Sheringham Leisure Centre, the Reef, has been moved back into September. This is not because of any immediate catastrophe. It's because I'm afraid this project has now been subjected to the delays in supply chain and in our ports, which are happening throughout the construction industry and throughout the nation. You will note that that date there is described as a realistically contemplated. And as far as I know, it is realistic. I have also added in today, because I was under the illusion that this might be the last time I came before your committee to talk about the Reef, I asked Mrs. Rawlings to supply you with with updates on the financial papers which you received in January, if you remember. So you have some added financial information here beyond the normal report format, because I think members found that extremely useful information earlier in the year. It gives a profile of the variations which have happened in the contract, and it also shows the profile of spending over the course of the contract, so you can see where the greatest spending occurred. You can see that it actually occurred a little bit later in the spring than was thought originally. My understanding is that the council has not yet borrowed money for this project because cash flow situation has been favourable. That's not to say that it won't have to be paid for in that way, but money hasn't been borrowed as quickly as thought. So I thought those financial papers might be helpful, but as I say, I originally thought they would be a good ending because there's no ONS in August, so I thought this might be the last, but perhaps it won't be. Anyway, that information is there for you because I know there have been some changes to the committee, but earlier in the year members found them very helpful, and so Mrs. Rawlings has updated them, and I'd like to express my thanks to her. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Gay. Any questions? Councillor Penfold.
Thank you. Just to ask Councillor Gay, I'm assuming that the completion date isn't the same as an opening date. So is the opening date still in September, or has that been pushed back further?
There never was a definite opening date scheduled. There was only the possibility of an opening date in September. So nothing has had to be officially cancelled. But yes, that is, I would like to stress that is a completion date. I've seen documents that refer to it as an opening date. It's not an opening date, it's a completion date. You will understand too that once these supplies arrive, the final testing will have to be done, and that's something that can't be skimped on. But there are plans for an opening date, but one has never been absolutely scheduled yet, Councillor Penfold. Thank you.
So can I just say, so do we have a rough idea when that might be? Would it be October time?
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
That is the sort of date which now seems feasible.
I guess it'd be good to know that as soon as possible so that schools and others could start to sort of timetable in
Exactly.
visits.
Exactly. Thank you.
Councillor Braithwaite.
Yeah, thank you, Virginia. Just to ask, that will be a soft opening first, still. Is that still the intention?
I would have thought so. That's usual because it means you have people in and they're using something, and that's part of the testing process, really, in the sense that you have an audience in and you see how things are working, and then you do a formal opening. That's often the way the council does things. Thank you.
Penfold.
I think it'd be quite good if we were able to go and visit at some point as a committee and have a look round. I'm not suggesting we take our speedos, but it would be good to do that if that's possible.
I think that's a wonderful idea, and I think it would have happened earlier if it weren't for COVID. I think in normal circumstances, a visit by the committee would have been arranged. There have been smaller visits. I've been twice, and obviously officers have been much more often. But on the visits that I made, there was careful social distancing and there was a limited number of people. So I think a committee visit, when that is legally possible and desirable for those who want to go, I can't see a problem. I think Rob Young is on this call. He may see difficulties that I don't see, but I think it would have happened earlier if it weren't for the circumstances of the last year. Thank you.
I'm getting a message that Mr. Young would be happy to arrange a visit, but just to clarify, were you meaning the committee or the wider membership?
Well, I meant the committee, but I think wider membership, I think that would be useful and helpful as well, actually. Yeah. Yes,
I think that would be. I think that would be very helpful if there were perhaps 2 or 3 visit dates so that members could choose, and we could then go round in reasonable size groups to view the facility. So I think that would be very helpful. And as Mr. Young has indicated, that looks as though that could well be possible when it is safe to do so. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Rest, and then
Oh, thank you, Chairman, for letting me speak. Just a query, really. If some of the products that we're waiting for, materials, are being held up in the docks, I think it sort of highlights the fact that when we look at any projects or anything, we really should try and source everything that we can locally, or certainly from this land, if possible. Then we wouldn't have had this problem. Hopefully they could have been delivered, but I think everyone's in that situation. I appreciate that. I'm not sure how the loss of income to our management team is made up from any insurance or anything, but I do think it's important that we get this materials as soon as we can. Thank you.
thank you. Yes, you wish to respond?
I'd just like to say, just speaking personally for myself, I think that these difficulties have perhaps highlighted how much we do import, and this, as Councillor Rest has suggested, it's something we may all have to reflect on in the future. Thank you, Chairman.
That's okay. Councillor Holiday.
Forgive me, because I'm not party to the history of this, but is the current budget position about what was expected in terms of overspend?
Yes, the budget position has actually remained since I've been addressing this committee. It has mostly stayed exactly the same. You can see it's the second item on this report. So the observation, no significant change to overall budget compared to that previously reported, has that statement has stayed the same for quite some time. But I don't think it's changed much in the time I've been reporting. There was an adjustment in the summer of 2019, which some people here may remember, but since then it's stayed the same, Councillor Holiday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Well, I guess I'm not quite sure what our next meeting date will be in September, but this might be the last time that we review it as an unopened facility. By unopened, I mean soft opening. We'll wait and see on that. Obviously, the next couple of months are quite crucial in that regard. So we will wait and see. But I think it's worth probably flagging up at this point. At a later point in the year, I think it would be very useful to have a review of the project. So that will be an overall review of how the project has gone and how, perhaps after maybe 3 months of use, how the project is picking up speed, and how what lessons and what celebration we can have from that project.
I think so, Chairman, because I think across this council, for all of us, this might make a useful case study, because we are opening this facility at a time when other authorities are closing facilities, and how that has been possible, what difficulties there have been along the way. I think that would be a very interesting appraisal. Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you. Are you then content to note that report? A show of hands, please. Thank you. Right. Thank you for that. Turning to item 11, North Walsham High Street Heritage Action Scheme Project Update for July. To receive and note the update. That's at page 23. Is that Stuart?
I believe we have Richard Kershaw here to start things off initially, and then we do have the officers here to support remotely as well.
Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first time we've brought this before the committee. The project is a holistic programme of interrelated projects aiming to improve vitality and viability of the North Walsham Town Centre. The project provides an opportunity to make a huge investment in the town centre for the benefit of the local community and local businesses. We recognise that high streets across the country are facing unprecedented challenges, and here is an opportunity to set a new direction for North Walsham. The success of any change process depends upon those affected agreeing with the need for change, understanding the process and appreciating the outcomes. And to this end, this project has been consultative from day one. Laura Blackwell, who's our project enabler, worked from the initial stages with the town council and interested parties and was successful in putting together the successful bid. Jenny Jordan joined us as the project manager and has taken this forward. We have had open days in the town. We have engaged now consultants and architects who have prepared a master plan, which is in the paper that you've obviously read. The overview of the project we will go through with Jenny's going to share some slides which depicts the programme, placemaking, the Cedars, building improvement grants, the cultural programme, which is very important, and we've recently received a grant of £90,000 to go in excess to go towards the cultural programming, and communication engagement, which is going to be an ongoing project to keep people in the loop. This is not something we intend to inflict on North Walsham. It's something that we're working with as many people as we can in North Walsham to bring this to fruition. In terms of governance, we had a working party initially, which was established by Cabinet to oversee the delivery. But now we have a project team, which is meeting weekly to oversee operation delivery. And we have a project board, which will be chaired by the Assistant Director of Sustainable Growth. And we'll have the project manager, economic growth manager, and other officers, as well as a portfolio holder and local members and members of the community. I don't think there's any point me going on beyond that in terms of an introduction, but if I could hand over to Jenny and Stuart to run through the slides, that I think would be useful. I'm happy to take questions anytime.
Okay, thank you very much. Over to you then, Officer Jordan.
Hello, hi, sorry, I'm rushing ahead with my slides. Hi, sorry. It's really welcome to be able to introduce the project to the committee today. Obviously, it's been running since last year, but we've spent a huge amount of time under the COVID restrictions, but a lot of work has still been going on behind the scenes. As Councillor Kershaw has explained, we have a very comprehensive programme looking at the revitalisation of the largest market town in the district, North Walsham. The funding for the programme has come from Historic England, matched by North Norfolk District Council, and we've subsequently successfully bid for additional funding through the LEP for some government funding, which is just over an additional £1 million. So the whole programme, and some additional funding has been secured from Historic England as well. So the whole programme now reaches £3.2 million. I thought it might just be useful to just have a few slides to just talk through the scheme and where we're at with it, really. As I say, it's a Historic England programme, and as Councillor Kershaw said, it's very much about working with the local community, as opposed to being a sort of top-down approach to regeneration of the high street. So the scheme itself is actually, it sort of focuses, sorry, I'll move that out of the way, focuses very much on the centre of North Walsham. So it's very much on the marketplace, St Nicholas's Church at the centre, and the surrounding streets, and very much the lokes as well, which lead people onto and around the town centre. The scheme itself, Historic England were very clear that these programmes have to be quite inclusive and are not just about some physical improvements. They're very much about cultural programming and activities that will engage with the local community, and that they will very much be part of the development of a scheme which will go way beyond the current Heritage England programme, the High Street Action Zone. And I think this sort of demonstrates there's a very wide range of activities going on that fall within the HAS programme within North Walsham. I'll just come on to the key projects. So within those 5 key projects, all the other sort of activities and projects fall. So one of the key ones, as Councillor Kershaw mentioned, was about improvements. These are physical improvements to the town centre. It's about looking at the public realm, making improvements to the marketplace and surrounding streets. So it will involve highways and lots of other partners in looking at those issues. And it's also about reconnecting the lokes and gateways to bring people into the town and around the town and to generally improve the environment. The second project is about the refurbishment and restoration of the Cedars, which is a Grade 2 listed building. A third project is a scheme for building improvements. This is for other buildings within the town centre that have a heritage or historic interest or may be listed. There's some historic heritage research and training underway, and also the cultural programme. So I'll just go give you a very quick overview of some of those. So as I say, the marketplace, lokes and gateways are all part of the placemaking work that's currently underway. We have already, we've got a really dynamic team of specialists. We have architects, landscape architects, designers, engineers, heritage architects, QS. They're all involved in developing the programme. And at present, we have a master plan that's been developed very much in consultation with the local community. We've been engaging with people, as Councillor Kershaw said, through lots of different activities. We've also now got to the stage of some concept designs for various parts of the town within the market, within the master plan. And the next stage, which we're at just reaching, currently approaching, is the detailed design stage. I won't go into sort of lots of information about placemaking, but basically the term sort of covers all sorts of different elements of sort of reactivating and improving the streetscape and public realm within town centres. It's about the environment, it's about wellness, transport accessibility, bringing people together, looking at what services are available to them within our town centres. And it really is a holistic approach to this development. As I said, we've had a lot of different engagement activities. We've had public exhibitions. Obviously, we had to deal with COVID, but we've done lots of online work as well. We've got a dedicated platform, which people can sort of go onto and interact with maps and surveys and information that we held at the recent exhibitions, which I hope very much are actually available to you today in the committee chamber or somewhere nearby. One of our colleagues, Laura, who helped put the bid together, was going to display them for me. So these were some of the information that was brought together to engage with the local community. We hope very much that you're able to look at those as well. But we've had lots of engagement with people like Paston College, the college based within North Walsham. They've put the display on for their students and engaged them in the surveys and asked them to give comments and things about using the town. And we took part last weekend before last in the fun day at North Walsham, and ongoing we'll be having a market stall and spending a lot of time in the town talking to people. The second sort of major project is the Cedars. As I say, this is Grade 2 listed building which the council owns. Some essential work has already been undertaken in terms of repairs, and so a number of, as it says in the report, a number of surveys have been undertaken, a full condition survey and various other specialist surveys, so we understand what the issues are. We're at the stage now where the architects that have been commissioned, they're conservation accredited architects. We work very closely on this with Historic England, and we're now looking at a detailed schedule and specification for the works which will be procured in the autumn. And work will commence on site to start repairing and restoring the building to bring it back into use. It's already being marketed and promoted by our estates team, hopefully to find some users who will want to move into this lovely building. There is a new programme which I'm about to launch in the next 2 weeks, which is an historic building improvements grant scheme. This is a scheme for property owners to apply for grants to help them to either improve shop fronts and historic facades and architectural features of their buildings, and that would involve reinstating what would originally have been in those shop fronts. It can have a big impact on a town centre high street by improving the appearance of those sorts of buildings. You may be aware there are 103 listed buildings in North Walsham, so it really is a very historic town centre, and hopefully this scheme will help to bring it back to its former glory, I guess. There's another element of this particular grant scheme is for repair and restoration work to be carried out on buildings, and also to do some conversions of unused floor space. So it is quite a comprehensive grant scheme, and that will be launched in the next 2 weeks. Another element of the programme, as I say, it's quite a comprehensive programme that has, is to do with heritage research and training. So as I say, there are lots of listed buildings. There's the beautiful Market Cross. There are lots of buildings that have cellars and tunnels beneath them. And of course, there is the church. So Historic England recognised that there hasn't really been any sort of detailed research into the architecture and heritage and buildings of North Walsham. So in parallel with the HAS scheme, they're carrying out an historic area assessment research programme over the next 2 years, which they're investing a huge amount of money in separately to the HAS and carrying it out themselves. So I'm working really closely with that team. They're visiting the town. They came a couple of weeks ago, and the findings from that should be really exciting and interesting. And obviously we'll use that to engage with the community and keep them up to date. And then alongside those sort of key HAS activities is a cultural programme which Councillor Gay has been involved with. And this is really just launching, but the programme has secured £90,000 over the next 3 years. It is led separately to the HAS programme, so I don't manage this as part of the HAS scheme. It's managed by a completely independent voluntary group, a cultural consortium, which has been established to drive and encourage lots of local groups and individuals to get involved with that element of the scheme. So as I say, I think it's interesting that community engagement really is at the heart of this programme. It's not just about physical improvements. I'm really keen to ensure that we do everything we can to keep people up to date, to get them involved, to let them have a role in it. We have established a stakeholder group which meets fairly regularly, and they've been involved with the consultants in workshops and obviously in the recent public consultation and engagement activities. But we also work very closely with lots of organisations across the town. We took part recently in the Big Bash virtual community engagement event and talked about the HAS scheme then and got lots of positive feedback as well. And finally, I just thought it might be useful just to sort of show you the overall HAS scheme budget. As I say, there are the separate elements. So if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see the sort of different key projects which the budget falls within. And as you'll see that we've spent to date in year one, £183,876. It obviously has been a challenge, I think, as identified with the reef project. It is a challenge in terms of a major financial investment in physical infrastructure projects. There are challenges with delays in materials. There are global shortages in very basic materials, and that applies within this country as well as elsewhere. So we're working to mitigate against any delay to this programme. To date, we're on track. One of the things that we are doing is we're working very closely with Norfolk County Council within their framework. We've already engaged with contractors. So when we go past the design stage and we get to planning, we've already started conversations with the contractors who are already sort of starting to source materials, although we don't have the designs. We do know some of the standard sorts of things that we will be requiring. So we're doing everything we can really to try and mitigate against that challenge. And obviously working closely with our funders to keep them updated of that. The profile of the scheme is very much that year two, the current year, the current financial year for this project is a critical year because so much investment will be going into the town centre placemaking work. The profile of the scheme is that it sort of reduces down into the following sort of year 3 and year 4, it falls again. But as the profile shows, the main sort of bulk of funding will go into that placemaking work and also into the building improvement scheme, which again could be affected by property owners, being concerned about investing in their buildings. So I'm working really closely. I've already engaged with quite a number of property owners within the town who are actually quite keen to get involved. They will have to match fund some of the investment if it goes into their buildings. So that's something that's ongoing. So once we launch the scheme in a couple of weeks, I'm very confident we will have some really good projects coming forward for that scheme. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that, Officer Gordon. Any questions? Got Councillor Penfold, then Councillor Gay, and then Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Jenny, for that presentation. It's a fantastic project, I think, real potential for North Walsham. So delighted to support it as a district councillor and as a county councillor on behalf of North Walsham. Just two questions, Jenny. Have we got any sort of early sort of headlines, I suppose, from the feedback? Any early headlines, sort of feedback from the consultations you've done with local stakeholders and local community? First part of the question. And the second part, just about monitoring and evaluation of the project. Is that something being done by an external consultant? Or I just wonder how we're managing the critical evaluation process.
Yep. So on the feedback from the recent community engagement events and the exhibitions, we had a really positive turnout. We had, I think, estimating it because it was quite difficult to count people, over 200 people would have been involved in that, in face-to-face sort of discussions, as well as lots of online and survey responses. And the feedback from the consultants who've already gone through now and started to sort of review all that information is that overwhelmingly people are very supportive of the initiative in terms of trying to look at the balance between pedestrians and traffic and cyclists and other users of the town centre, the businesses. They're very keen on particularly greening, some of the greening proposals and suggestions. There were a lot of positive responses to that in particular. So, and also, sorry, in engaging young people, particularly in possible initiatives to help them to establish businesses, perhaps through things like market stalls. We had a lot of feedback on, sorry, the identity of North Walsham. Again, it was overwhelmingly positive. I mean, people had some very perceptive comments about the kind of town it is, but what it could become and what it might be in the future. And the businesses as well were very keen to work together. So we're working now on establishing a business partnership to enable them to come together to sort of promote the town as a destination, as somewhere for local people to come and shop or to use the services. And I think it was interesting as well. I mean, it's slightly beyond the scope of the house project, but hopefully this will be the catalyst for engaging people and perhaps looking at how the high street will change and become more vibrant in different ways. So looking at outside space for people to sit and to meet and to socialise, and all those sort of things that can contribute to well-being as well. In response to your question about monitoring and evaluation, obviously the programme has to, is being monitored. Well, I'm carrying out monitoring of information, what we're actually delivering. So in terms of Historic England, I have to report on things like the areas of public realm that will be improved, the numbers of buildings that will be improved through the grant scheme. We're looking at footfall. So we've had a monitoring system installed in North Walsham High Street, and we're due to get the data starting to stream, I think, in the next week. So I'll be able to report back on trends in terms of footfall. Obviously, it'll be some time before the improvements are actually made, and then the impact of that will be seen. But it's really useful to have that sort of information, which we don't currently have about usage of the high street. I think also the Historic England will be commissioning external evaluation of the overall programme. So there'll be an external evaluation as well, separately to the work that we're doing. And also throughout the scheme, looking to sort of gather information, carry out surveys, and looking at sort of some of the softer outcomes and benefits from the programme. So we have the sort of outputs and harder outputs, but there's also the impact in terms of people's perceptions and, you know, how they feel about the high street and the improvements that we're hoping to make.
Okay. I don't know, is it me or was the sound pretty muffled this morning? Yes.
Sorry.
If I might just clarify, in terms of monitoring, there is also a weekly meeting which involves officers, the consultants, Historic England, Norfolk County Council, Highways, and any other interested parties, and it's monitored and it's weekly, so it has been going on. It's quite intense, and that's really paying attention to timing and to budgets and material purchases. So it's being very scrupulously followed at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Councillor Gay?
Thank you, Chairman. I just admit right now, this is more of a statement than a question. I just wanted to reinforce some things which Jenny said in her very admirable presentation. The work on this project was begun by Laura Blackwell, and she deserves great credit for that. In addition, it was the strong community presence which influenced Heritage England, and they said this. And for those of us who were involved in seeking letters of support for the project, the response was amazing. You'd say to people, could you possibly do this letter by next Tuesday afternoon? And people would say, yes, of course we will. That's no problem. We will do it right away. We would like to do it. So right from the beginning, it was a credit to the entire town. And I should say that Heritage England has taken particular interest in our town. It isn't just the architecture which is of interest to them. It is the expansive history which lies behind this, because it is in many ways such an exemplary English market town, from being Wall Church and the association with the Peasants' Rebellion, through the prosperity, the agricultural changes and prosperity of the 18th and 19th century, association with Nelson, founding of the Agricultural Workers' Union. So Heritage England has done quite a lot above and beyond, because they think that this is a particularly interesting town. So like Saul, I think I'm one of the few representatives for North Walsham here today to say how inspiring this has been right from the beginning. And I'd like to say that our officers have also responded so energetically to this. I mean, for example, we had 2 exhibitions in the town, and there was some expression on social media that some people hadn't been able to attend. So our officers gave up another evening and did another exhibition for us. So many people have done so much for this project, and I just wanted to express gratitude to all of them. And as for the users, when I asked about this, I was told that around a couple of hundred people had attended the exhibitions in person, but several hundred people have accessed the engagement site. So the engagement and interest in this project has continued. It wasn't just from those who are very active in the community at the beginning. It has continued. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Gay. Let's hope the outcomes are equally amazing, and let's hope that the people that you've spoken about see as I said, the outcomes in the way that they anticipate. So thank you for that. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of points I'd like to make. First of all, we saw some figures flashed on the screen. I think going forward, it'd be very helpful for our committee to actually be given all the figures in terms of that we can actually look and monitor the spend on the project as well. I would just like to focus a little bit on the Cedars development. I note clearly following the failure of Wetherspoons to actually take up any offer to proceed with that, the council has decided to take hold of the building and renovate it itself. I would like to actually be interested to see actually if we've got any estimated costs for actually doing that, and also understand as part of the purpose of doing that is to get other parties interested in the building, which I'm assuming may be looking at letting doing that. So do we have any indication that there is any demand out there for that? It does seem curious at a time when people are increasingly working from home that actually we're going down the line of actually trying to create office space to let it out. And in addition to that, I mean, what other options could be on the table for that building? So have we looked at, is there any other options of actually selling the building? Would that realise any greater benefit? Or alternatively, off the top of my head, even looking at converting the building into flats. I mean, obviously, the later agenda item that we are going to have is the need for more housing. I'm not familiar with the building, but certainly is that another option that could be considered? Just want to know where we are in the mix of things, or are we actually now set firmly down the path we're going to take hold of it, renovate it, and then try and make some money out of it? Thank you.
Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you. Good questions. Have no problem at all in sharing with you the budgets and the cash flow sheets. That's not a problem at all. As we're proceeding, it's Historic England that are working with us to invest in the building, which means if we then have to lease the building, we can't sell it, because that's a condition of their input funds to the restoration of the building. It's possible it could go for housing. We're open. We've had 3 expressions of interest so far in the building. So, and that came after the cabinet meeting. So we're pursuing those. One of them is for a cafe pub stroke with rooms above to be let. 2 others are for commercial use. Obviously, we have to return a commercial rent. It's not for free. And we have also interest from the community. The site adjacent is being marketed. Obviously, it sits within the the heritage zone of the town. So, and it's adjacent to a list of buildings. So that will be closely scrutinised in terms of planning. But we are open to offers, and it's being marketed, and there is interest. That's
Obviously, assuming this will be a regular item, Mr. Chairman, on the agenda, so we can monitor that. I think.
Absolutely happy to be monitored.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buttigieg.
Right.
You've got it now.
Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to turn the mic towards you?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask Jenny Jordan her views on green credentials and also potentially carbon footprint implications, because working on listed buildings, it's always really difficult to try and have improvements into sort of heating and things along those lines. Thank you.
Councillor Jordan.
Sorry, we are working very closely with Historic England. Obviously, it's a listed building, but it's also one of our sort of flagship projects through the HAS programme. And when we commissioned the conservation architects, one of the sort of elements of the brief that was issued to them was very much about looking at sustainability in terms of materials and methods used to improve the building. I think they're about to commission some M&E specialists to look at things like heating, possibly replacing the existing boiler with, more appropriate sources of heating. So all those sorts of elements will be considered as part of this. I think the challenge as a local authority, obviously, the budget for this enhancement of the building is approximately, I think it's £375,000 in total. So within the constraints of that, that's the budget that's available for this restoration work to take place. But within that, we will obviously be ensuring we do whatever we can to make sure it is a sustainable and uses environmentally, ecologically sound methods and materials where possible.
Thank you for that, but my question was broader. It was to do with the historic access zone rather than the Cedars.
Sorry, yes, and again, in terms of the physical works that are taking place, the placemaking work, that's one of the elements that was included in the brief for that work as well. I think as a whole for this programme, we totally understand that it has to contribute to the delivery of the council's overall corporate priorities. So that, and obviously that's one of those. So I'm working with other colleagues within the council that work in those areas. They've taken part in some of the consultation engagement work that we've done so far, and things like, for example, greening, looking at bringing in sort of community gardens and that sort of thing within the landscape and public realm, for example. But also in terms of materials and sourcing of materials. I've picked up the point from the previous project that, that's one of the things we're talking to contractors about, is where possible we can bring in materials as closely to the site as possible, but also, in a sustainable way if we can. I think I suppose the approach is that we're looking at this in all the different elements of the project, so it's not just sort of a separate thing. It totally is an overarching sort of priority for the overall project.
Thank you. If you understood all of that, Councillor Batakova, you're a better man than I. Right, Councillor Holliday.
This is a fantastic project and many congratulations. And I was just wondering if it was going to be rolled out to any other market towns in the district. And I know there was talk the other meeting about some funds available to Fakenham, for example, for some scoping exercise, but there are other market towns deeply in need of this sort of regeneration. And I wondered what the thoughts were about that.
Thank you. Councillor Kershaw.
Yes, that would be fantastic. This is a project won from the government. The government have obviously been generous with Great Yarmouth recently, giving them 13 million for the winter gardens. If they're willing to give us the money, then obviously yes, we would apply. But at the moment, there is no market town initiative presently. But we will, if any funds become available, we will make an application, of course.
Thank you, Councillor Whittington.
Yes, I'd like to echo what Councillor Holliday's just said. Actually, it looks like it's going to be an amazing project. We're doing something in Sheringham sort of from within the community on a much smaller scale, but sort of similar ideas. And I've just stolen a couple of the slides ideas for our engagement. But one of the things that we've been looking at, and I noticed Officer Jordan talked about measuring footfall. One of the things we've been looking at in a lot of the research in regeneration projects of towns is that footfall is measured, and that's sort of a standard thing that's done. In terms of the increase in income or revenue that's coming into the town is very rarely measured. And one of the impacts we've been looking at, and you can see it in Cromer on the area there, which has been pedestrianised, is this: you get this switch from retail businesses to hospitality, those kind of businesses. So although footfall increases, you may actually change the structure of your town. And I think that's something I'd really like the project team to consider and keep hold of, because it's certainly, when you look at Cromer or New Street or New Road, I can never remember which way it is, they've now got one retail shop left in that area. The rest of it is all hospitality. And so for, in terms of Sheringham, which is quite similar to North Walsham in a way that it serves the purpose of essential shops for the local community for the whole year round, it's important that that retail sector is protected. So that's just one aspect, I would hope that can be looked at in a little bit more detail. And also bringing, like all of us, we're trying to encourage people to use public transport. So I think it needs to be carefully considered how that's maintained in the town centre. So good luck, and I think it's amazing that this is taking place. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes, I think Sheringham will have its place in the queue. I imagine there'll be others that will be lining up, but you make some good points, and hopefully they'll be picked up. And I rather suspect they, in general terms, that we're talking about probably town-specific things that won't be the same in Sheringham as it is in Fakenham or in Holt. There are specifics, but I think in general your point is well made. Councillor Kershaw.
That's very true. We have got a business consortium and we're working with them to try and engage new businesses that to come into the town, which are retail. So footfall, we understand is important, but it's not the be all and end all. There is a natural reticence for businesses to give me their turnovers. But that would be interesting. A couple have agreed that they will share their turnovers on a yearly basis. So that will give us some indication of retail success or failure as we go forward. But yeah, we are working with businesses to encourage growth of businesses on the high street. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Penfold.
Thank you. I was just going to ask Jenny, sounds like we're building some really good partnerships through this project. So just focusing in on what you might call the learning sector and probably the more formal learning sector, but it could be informal as well. Obviously, there are terrific opportunities for learning, skills development, training, research, that kind of thing. Do we have, I assume we've got good links already with Paston College, local schools, etc. Is there anyone on the project steering group that has a specialism in that, or who has been particularly tasked with nurturing those relationships and kind of really understanding what schools and colleges actually need in terms of curriculum and their wider learning objectives, so that this project can support what it is that they're trying to deliver as well in their environments? Thank you.
Is this one that you can answer, Councillor Kershaw, or I'm just conscious of? Would you rather?
Yes, I can. We have engaged with the schools. There are projects we're working with the schools on history, culture, and we are looking to also do some training for restoration of historic buildings in terms of the techniques. We said that's a valuable, it is a valuable training exercise, and we have a paucity of skilled work people in this area. So yes, we are taking it very seriously. There are often teachers, in my experience, who are looking for sort of professional development opportunities as well, that will obviously support their career growth in terms of research and developing resources for schools and for other learners. But I think it is a real specialism. So it'd be good if I don't know whether someone on the project board has that as a sort of part of their brief, as it were.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to wrap this one up. So
yeah, I'll be very, very quick. Just to say that as a member of the Boards Authority Heritage Committee, we have been using a very close connection with local colleges for apprenticeship schemes on all our heritage projects, especially the watermills and marshes. So this does present a real opportunity to promote good training opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, I want to just wrap this one up. I've got one last question, I think, for you, Councillor Kershaw, which is, I may have missed it, but I can't see anything referring to project risk. And I wonder whether that has been adequately covered. Are there any issues that give you cause for concern with regard to project risk?
It's not mentioned in the report. It is taken very seriously. I could refer you to Officer Quick, who will have the details of that, but it's certainly high in our priorities.
So maybe that's something that can be developed a little more.
It'll come along with the monitoring. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay. Thank you very much for that. My recollection is that we are required to note.
Yeah, I just note, Chairman, Councillor Cushing did raise this in terms of how much you would want to see this going forward. I don't think it's certainly not the same level required as a splash perhaps, but if you just want to give that some quick consideration and perhaps take a vote on how you would like to add that to the work programme going forward.
That's very good points there. So in addition to noting it, I think we will pick up on that recommendation to bring that back and a kind of frequency. Do you have any views on when you would like to see this coming back? What kind of frequency?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would say something like quarterly would be reasonable.
Quarterly? Any advance on quarterly?
I'd quite like more often than that, but I'll accept quarterly because I think it is important we do monitor this and we learn from it, particularly as an exemplar project for other towns possibly.
Well, we're not going to cast that in concrete. So if we start off with quarterly, we'll see how we go and take it from there. But we'll pick up on that. And I wonder if we could have a bit more with regard to an analysis of risks, of the project risks, so that may be brought back to us in the future. One shouldn't forget that this is a £3.2 million project, so it's not insignificant. Okay, are we content then to, in addition to note those, to have those two recommendations?
Yeah, if we just take Christopher's request for a quarterly update as a proposal, do we have a seconder for that?
I assume Councillor Penfold, thank you.
And if you just take a vote, that would be great, please. Just a formal vote, sorry, to accept those.
Thank you. A show of hands, please. Thank you. Right, thank you very much for that. Moving on then to item 12, which is the ambulance response times, Coastal Parish Working Party update. And we are fortunate enough to have, I believe, the chairman of that working group, Councillor Holliday, to cover this matter. Over to you, Councillor Holliday.
Thank you, Chair. I'm assuming you've all read the paper, so I won't go into it in great detail, but it started really when the BBC published that Wells had the longest response times in the country. At that time, it was 23 minutes for a most urgent ambulance. And it took 3.5 hours for someone to come and pick up my neighbour who'd had a stroke, which meant that she had absolutely no chance of getting thrombolysis. And that's when we thought it was good to start talking to the ambulance trust, and it really grew from there. So it's a very complex issue. It's to do with commissioning, it's to do with rurality, it's to do with the interface of primary care and acutes and the mental health trust. It's to do with a population shift in terms of how it accesses emergency care. It's a very complicated issue, and the ambulance trust does its very best to manage all those things. And it's more a question really for the CCG, the commissioning group, as to how many resources they'd like to put into this area. So it's grown a little bit from harassing the ambulance trust, which was really unfair at the beginning, to trying to work together with the CCG in more of a challenging way to get ambulance response times. And it started off with a group of parishes sitting down and saying, what are the things that we think will make ambulances get to our relatives quicker? And they came up with very basic things such as, sat-nav routing and, more mental health support in the ambulance response centre, and things that came up from the ground up, which we thought was quite helpful. And so we've been working on those as actions. Obviously, we're not taking them forward. We're encouraging East and the CCG to take them forward. And alongside our existence, some things have happened, some things haven't. COVID, of course, has impacted greatly on this. So whatever progress we might have made has been derailed really by the need for urgent ambulances going up hugely. But I think we've held our, the times are still far too long. They're longer in rural than in the urban areas. Though, if you look at this report, you'll see that the postcodes that we drill down to, and that's really the nub of this report, is that the ambulance trust reports things at the CCG or district level. We get things, we go through the Freedom of Information Act and get the numbers for response times at the postcode level, which means it really shows the difference between the rural areas and the more urban. And I think that's probably one of the values of this group. And so we're still too long for very urgent calls in the rural areas. The more urban areas are not too bad at all. And we have got some actions that we're working on and that we would like to take forward. And the really important ones, I think, for the next steps, I think the recruitment of community first responders is something that we could really help with at the parish and district level, because they are a vital element of the chain. We really need to continue to have rapid response vehicles. These are the paramedics in cars that drive around and come and give you immediate life-saving treatment. They can't transport you to hospital, and the national drive is to have double-staffed ambulances coming to you first off, which is absolutely fine if you live in a city. But if that double-staffed ambulance is going to take 45 minutes to get to you, then you know obviously that time of critical need has passed. And so we need to keep them. And we have put pressure on. I think we have enabled them to stay for longer than they would have done, but I think they're budgeted now to stay till the autumn, and we need to make sure that they continue because they really are vital for our population. There was during this time the project with the stroke ambulance, which was a dedicated ambulance kitted out like a stroke unit, basically, that came to the end of your drive and sorted you out if you had a stroke. And you know, in the ideal world, we'd have one of those in North Norfolk, because we have the highest incidence of strokes in the country. And but it's a very expensive bit of kit, and you know that might be something we consider a bit like the air ambulance. Would it be a charity issue? But that would be, you know, when that project has been evaluated, I think that's something to look at. I think we should continue requiring the information to come out at the postcode level, which is I think where we started this dialogue, and I came to talk to you a few years ago, because if you aggregate the data, it makes the picture look very different. And I think it's important to drill down, and that should be coming from the ambulance trusts voluntarily through the CCG commissioning it and part of their contract. But you know, at the moment we're getting it ourselves. But I think we're still working on the ambulance trust to get that as part of, you know, as the normal really. And then the other thing really is whether we should do this more widely and not just have the coastal strip. I have requested through FOI the emergency response numbers for every single postcode in the district. I'm waiting for those to come through. The early ones were NR12 and NR29, which are, as I say, Haysborough, Bacton and Potterham. So they're quite a long way from my patch, but it might be quite, they're also not brilliant. So it'd be quite interesting if we looked at that. And going back to Wells, which is where we started, a postscript to this was that the ambulance trust are looking to put extra resources there, which of course would be very good, because it would, because the moment the nearest resources to Wells are a very long way away. So I see this as a pressure group, as finding the information out that is somewhat buried, let's say. And hopefully now that COVID is somewhat past, that we'll be able to see some improvement in the times. Anyway, happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for that. So I think in summary, am I right in saying that basically we've seen very little real improvement, and across the board, to one extent or another, there is significant missing of targets?
Yep.
I'm particularly interested in your working party next steps, because presumably they are what the group sees as things that will help to address that or mitigate that in some way, shape or form. And just to clarify, I think the second one that you've got there, which is continue campaign for retention of rapid response vehicles in North Norfolk. Are these for community first responders, or are these for community paramedics?
Paramedics, they're very highly trained paramedics. They've got level above normal paramedics. So this is in addition to community first responders who are trained to do basic CPR, that sort of thing.
And are these the paramedics that were or may still be attached to surgeries?
Well, that's a whole different discussion. We could talk for hours about paramedics and surgeries, but there are now paramedics attached to surgeries through this new congregation of surgeries into primary care networks. But these would be more highly qualified than them, and they would be employed by the ambulance trust rather than by the PCN.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment, really. Representing Wells, we're very well aware that it's just not the remoteness of Wells, but the fact that in the summer months, there is so much traffic and so many parked cars, even when the first responders, ambulances get to the town, they can't actually get to where they need to go to the particular house or to the incident. And I think there's a realism that there are a number of things that will have to be sorted out before we will ever get these response times reduced.
Is that something that the working parties picked up?
No, they've certainly picked up the summer demand, and the Ambulance Trust have put together a summer demand deflection program, which includes cyclists, paramedic cyclists in certain, not actually in Wells, but in Huntston and the bigger towns. They actually have a paramedic on a bicycle, and so they have picked on it to a certain extent. But I can certainly take that back to them. We're meeting in a couple of weeks' time, and we can bring it up. So thank you.
I imagine the other big factor is the population growth during the holiday time, and obviously, to some extent, the traffic is a function of that, but the actual demand on calls must be greatly increased by the population, tourist population.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much traffic there in the actual way that the town is placed with their roads. And the biggest car park is Holcomb's car park at the end of Beach Road. And the traffic goes through the town and it becomes absolutely gridlocked, so much so that the local beat officer has to actually stand at the crossroads and turn people away from the town. Doesn't happen in many places.
Any other comments on what we've heard? No. I'm particularly, I think, taken by the first of those next steps, which is regarding the role and the contribution that the community first responders could make, because from a very lay perspective, my understanding is that first hour, the interventions that are made during the first hour are particularly crucial. And if that intervention comes from a community first responder and saves a life, well, that's absolutely amazing. And that's something that we would want to support. Whereas the arrival of the ambulance, which is in many people's view, that's the means of transport by which people will get to the hospital. But that intervention, the speed of that intervention is absolutely crucial in preserving life. And I think that there's probably more that we can do. And I noticed that you've got that as a further step as well in spreading that across the district. So I welcome those. Thank you. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following up from that, and indeed, I think I congratulate Councillor Holliday on an excellent report. With regard to community first responders, do we have a map across the district of where community responders actually cover and where they don't? And I just wondered if there was any way that we could get hold of that information.
Yep.
Where we might get it from, I don't know.
Councillor Holliday and then Councillor Gay.
Well, I can find that out from the Ambulance Trust next time we talk and bring that back to you, or send that to you separately. Thank you. It's very helpful. Good suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Gay.
I was going to say, as far as first responders are concerned, Chairman, I have asked Mrs. Shooter for that information to see where they are across the district, what areas they serve. So hopefully we will have authoritative answers to those questions quite soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Right. I think we would just note this report. Again, I don't know how you feel, but I think that that's been particularly useful in terms of updating us. And I'm not going to say that we should set a frequency, but I wonder if there is a time when we might like to have another update. Does anybody have a feel for that? Maybe, I don't know, in 12 months' time, because this thing is not going to happen overnight. So would that be useful if we had another look in 12 months' time? Mindful that we do have efforts still with Norfolk Health Overview and Scrutiny underway, but I think that the scale and the extent of the problem is one that will take quite a bit of time, and a number of measures will need to be brought to bear. So if we brought it back in 12 months, would that be to your liking? Councillor Withington?
I just have a concern with that in terms of Councillor Halliday raised that the budgeting for the rapid response vehicles finishes this autumn, did you say? Yeah. And it may well be that I think we all probably appreciate how significant in those rural areas on here that those vehicles are. And it may be that we might be required to offer further support to try and encourage that increase in budget. So just whether we need a mechanism to be able to come back to that.
Well, I guess there's nothing to stop us from supporting that now, is there?
No.
So if that's one of the outcomes that you would support, i.e. for the trust to, we would be supporting the trust retention of the rapid response vehicles in North Norfolk. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Noting this report, which is, extremely pertinent, we've mentioned the summer increase in tourism and everything else, especially at Wales, that started all this. I think possibly, we're next probably looking at a major surge around Christmas. So it seems to me that maybe if we do it every 6 months, with an option to increase should we need it, you get a winter period of a peak and you get the summer peak. And I don't think it's overburdening anybody to have a 6 month review on this, because the importance, which goes right through this, is only going to increase. Because we've got more people come to live here, you've got more second homes, you've got more tourism, more traffic, more cars, everything else. So I think maybe 6 months is the option. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think I'll take my lead from Councillor Holliday in terms of the working party. That's an imposition on the working party and yourself. So do you have a comment on that?
I think so. I think 6 months is better, because I think we need to keep the pressure on, and I'm hoping we'll see some improvements. Do you want me to send round the rest of the postcode, the rest of the district's numbers when I get them from FOI?
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
And then obviously that if we wanted to incorporate that it turns from being a coastal strip to being a more generic, but it'd be quite interesting if there were pockets that were really problems, then I think we should have a look at, where the resources are being deployed. So we'll review that next time.
Yeah. Perhaps we, if I've got it right, we've got sort of three actions emerging. One is to and we'll take this forward as a committee recommendation to write to the Ambulance Trust with regard to the support for retaining the rapid response vehicles across the district. The second will be to bring this back in 6 months, review it in 6 months. And the third will be to, lost it for a moment. The third one
I thought, Mr. Chairman, we were looking at actually trying to plot out how many.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it.
Which first one?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
With those in mind, do you wish for a formal vote on this?
Yes, if you could, please.
Right. Okay. Show of hands then, please, in support of those actions. Thank you. Councillor Buttigieg, was that a yes? Okay, thank you.
So can I just confirm who is seconding? I think I have.
Councillor Withington.
Thank you.
Right. Okay then. Thank you for that. Turning to item 13, the new housing strategy for 2021 and through 2025. Fredericks.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'd like to introduce this housing strategy to you. As housing is a top priority for North Norfolk District Council. The Council's new housing strategy will build on the work done so far to provide more housing and improve housing conditions in the district. The achievements include 14 homes for use as temporary accommodation for homeless households and people at risk of rough sleeping. These make the council less dependent on bed and breakfast accommodation, which is both expensive to provide and unsuitable for long-term occupation. The delivery of the first new extra care housing scheme in Fakenham. This provides self-contained flats with on-site support to enable older residents to continue to live independently. Overall delivery of new homes above target over the last 3 years, meaning NNDC has met our housing delivery test and a pipeline of new affordable homes in the district. 108 in 2020-21 and 183 projected for 2021-22. The council's new housing strategy has been developed with extensive involvement from stakeholders, people and organisations with knowledge of housing in the district. Its 4 themes focus on major challenges facing housing in the district. Increasing the supply of housing with enough homes to meet the needs of local residents. Improving housing conditions in the private sector, therefore reducing fuel poverty and helping to reduce carbon emissions. Making the best use of existing homes. This includes ensuring that affordable homes are allocated fairly and encouraging landlords to let homes for market rent. And supporting vulnerable residents to live in their homes or to move to a home more suited to their needs. I'd like to congratulate the officers on a fantastic strategy and how they've laid it out. I think they're forward thinking, they're using their initiative. This is going to be a moving document as we continue to work with strategic partners monthly, weekly. We're trying to find new solutions to problems. And I'd like to hand over to Nikki, who is our strategic housing manager, and welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think from the point of view of use of time, I think we can take it that everybody has read the strategy and that I don't know whether there's anything that officers would like to add to what what's already been said or what we've got before us, but I think we should consider certainly what we've got before us and move on to questions. But first of all, officers, do you have anything that you'd like to add to what's already been said?
Good morning. No, I don't think so. I think Councillor Fredericks has given you a good overview. There are lots of actions, there are lots of facts in the strategy backing paper, lots of actions in the action plan. So I'm more than happy for myself and my job share partner, Graham, to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Officer Devich. That's very, very helpful. I'm going to kick off with one question, if I may, please. And I guess that's what's probably is uppermost in most of our minds, and that is regarding affordable housing, because that's the most problematic, I think, aspect of housing provision. So my question is this: what's different about this strategy from previous that will address the supply deficit of 81 units per year? So what's different?
Okay, I'm happy to answer that. I don't think there's a silver bullet in this strategy. I think what there is a series of different actions. In reality, delivery of new homes has been on or close to target. Certainly last year it was above target, and this year it's projected to be significantly above target in terms of new build affordable homes. The issue we have had is the number of disposals, but I am very pleased to report that the number of disposals has dropped very dramatically over the past 2 years, partly I think as a result of Victory Housing's previous work and disposing of a lot of the very worst properties. So the number of properties left that they would target for disposal is much, much fewer. But also I think our work with them to reinforce the importance of retaining as much social housing as is possible. So I think that's part of it. There are also a number of smaller issues in here around de-risking future development plans, around potentially looking at more support in the planning service for affordable housing, a whole range of different measures, which I think in total will ensure that we do get delivery of the number of affordable homes that we need.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I hope you're right, but that deficit of 81 out of the 100 that we're meant to provide is a significant proportion.
Sorry, I can't see where the deficit is.
Well, it's quoted in the paper that we've had previous deficits of 81 units of affordable housing per year.
All right,
So,
because we've actually met the target, which is 100. So we've met that this year with 108, and then the projected target is 183 for next year.
so if you look on page 48, the top second paragraph down, and it speaks there of a net deficit of 81 homes per year.
And again, I think the major issue with that is to do with the number of disposals that are, you know, if we look at the net, if we look at the gross supply of new affordable homes, we were there or thereabouts in terms of 100 a year. It has been the impact of disposals on the net delivery. And as I say, I think we've been working on both elements of this, both trying to increase the number of new builds, but also trying to decrease the number of disposals made by housing association partners.
Yeah, so the point I was really making was that we're looking for 100 a year, but actually we're not achieving 100 a year. In the past, we've been falling short on that, and really, it's the confidence that we're going to deal with that.
As I said at Cabinet, I'm really confident. I've seen the pipeline coming forward, and this is baseline estimate. Our partners are working really hard with us at the moment, looking at different and unconventional ways of building so that we can actually get those numbers up. So I'm really confident, and I'm meeting personally with Flagship in a couple of weeks as well to reinforce that as well. So I'm very confident that we can reach that, but I want more. I want a home for every person, every local person in North Norfolk. I want that. So that's what we're striving to achieve.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Peters, and then Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I did read the report, and I'm like you, concerned for local housing for local people. And I think here there is a high risk element because we are relying an awful lot on local neighbourhood plans to be cooperative and to be supportive. And I remember last year when I got a lot of personal abuse because I passed through by one vote or helped pass through a very small development in South Reps for rented housing in, that was then Victory. And I'm still getting abused because they've started to build them. Now, if this is the kind of attitude we're going to get from these local villages, and I remember other councillors, the previous administration having to deal with the same protests because we don't want them here, what the hell are we going to do? And I just think it's a very, very high risk strategy. I want local homes for local people. We do have people here with a far lower remuneration for their jobs and labour. And I think this is a very, very high risk strategy. That's all.
Okay, do you wish to respond to that?
I'd like to assure you that in the making of this strategy, we actually had town and parish councillors present as well, and they were putting ideas forward. And that actually, I don't think that was actually mentioned from them. But yeah, I think most people in North Norfolk will realise that local people need housing that they can afford. With somebody on a full-time job on minimum wage, that's only £16,000 a year. That's not a lot of money at all to A, live on, and B, afford private rental, which there aren't very many at the moment at all. We're facing a perfect storm. Landlords are getting rid of their properties because obviously the house prices have gone up and they're realising their profits. They're also reluctant to let to people on benefits or lower incomes, or incomes that actually are 0 hours. We have mortgage companies turning people away that have been on furlough or have accepted grants. So yes, we're really concerned about this, and I truly believe that we can achieve this, if not more. And together, and this strategy has been put together from members, from officers, from town and parish councils and landlords as well. So I really sincerely believe that we can achieve that together. Thank you.
I think, I mean, you make a good point, and I think the nub of the issue here, the real challenge here is that when we hold seminars and workshops and so on and so forth, and we get partners and people who are involved with making those kind of key decisions and delivering them. It is, of course, one thing to kind of sign up to the principle. And I think all of us would recognize the kind of pressures that are on, you know, those that are on the housing list and the difficulty we have in meeting them. The trick really is that further down the line, when the planning application comes in to that particular, this or that or the other particular village, town or area, that is when the crunch point comes, and I think that's probably what Councillor Pearce has probably put his finger on there with regard to one village, and I doubt it's the only village, but it's that translation from yes, this is what we want to do to now let's do it. That's the trick, and I think we've got to wait and see how that one works out. I really hope that what you are explaining will deliver on that, but I think there are a number of risks around that.
We do in the team have a community liaison officer as well. So Anna works very closely with the town and parish councils to try and mitigate those objections as well. So there is work in process with that, but I do understand the point. Thank you.
Yes, good job you've mentioned that, because I've actually sat in a parish council when what the team has presented to the parish council, and I'm not going to name the parish council, but I've certainly experienced quite entrenched resistance even at that point, and that was with the help of the liaison officer, and I wouldn't underestimate the degree of challenge here, and I would say no more than that. Thank you. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to come back to the point you were making about the targets for new affordable homes. And I'm sure all of us agree in the importance of doing that, regardless of our party political colours in here. But surely a target does have to take into account the number of affordable homes that are being sold elsewhere. So we have a net figure. So if we've got 100 target, then it has to take into account the factors. At the moment, we're looking at the calculations, rough calculations, like something like 64 are actually being already in a position where we're effectively minus 64 in a year anyway. So therefore, we need to actually be looking to build presumably more than that anyway in order to meet those targets. The other point I would like to make, Mr. Chairman, is just looking at the overall strategy, if I may. You said it's ambitious, but my concern is there's a lot of vague words in here. If I go to the strategy action plan, we've got things like develop, investigate, 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 engage better, work with, consider, establish, and so it goes on. I mean, all those sort of points don't actually drive you to any hard measurable targets and get some achievable outcomes. And if this has been 2 years in the making, which is how long obviously the administration's been in power, I would have expected something a little bit more definitive that actually helps us get to the, I suppose, the promised land in terms of housing in North Norfolk.
Rightio, thank you. That's fine. I mean, taking your point, your previous point about the disposal of the houses, what happens with those houses is that our strategic partners meet with the housing team and they go through each house and see how much it would take for us to bring that up to a home that is economical to run for the tenant, because it's no good putting tenants in housing and then automatically they're in fuel poverty. So we have to look at that really carefully and see where the houses are. Some of the houses are really rural and therefore they can't be sustainable for people on low incomes. So there's lots of different factors on why this is happening. and that we can't buy up all the houses. I'd love to buy up all the houses. I'd love it. I'd love everybody to have a house in North Norfolk, but it simply isn't possible and it isn't sustainable for those people. And, you know, being on a low income, you might realise that, yes, heating is probably more important than probably a lot of things in life, and putting that money into your food budget. So when people have to decide whether to eat or heat, that concerns me. That concerns me greatly. So yes, we do look at all the disposals. As for the strategy, yes, it's a moving feast because we are constantly reviewing, we're constantly working with our partners and pushing them harder to build and build. So yeah, and also government initiatives, you know, there's things coming out that we need to look at too. The first homes, we're going to have to see how that reflects on the plan and local plans as well when we get details through. So thanks.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Penfold.
Thank you.
Then Councillor Holiday and then Councillor Whittington.
It's a good strategy. Thank you for it. I think we are, it seems to me, I mean, we can sort of argue about the stats, but a bit harsh on that because we are building over the target. The deficit is being caused by the disposals by housing associations. So we are exceeding the target that we have set for building affordable houses. I think if what I would say is, could we do our best to encourage those housing associations to not dispose of properties? I've had a couple of cases locally where a family in a 2-bedroom house is desperate to move to a 3-bedroom house and has seen those disposed of by Victory and kind of wrap that all up with North Norfolk Council, District Council, disposing of them. So I think it's us that's getting rid of them. So I would just try, you know, could we encourage as far as possible those disposals? I think Nikki said that they were reducing, which is great, but that's where the deficit obviously is coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to respond?
Yeah, that's I can respond to that. Yes, the disposals are going down, which is fantastic. I don't know if you're familiar on how people bid for local authority housing or council housing, as it used to be called, on the Your Choice, Your Home website. For every house that's advertised by a housing association, there are 92 bids to get that house. So yes, we don't want them to dispose of the houses, we really don't. And it's same with the adaptations, that some houses are they cannot adapt. So the answer is, unfortunately, to sell those houses and create more better economical and sustainable housing. But we're looking at all different kind of strategies with our housing partners. Thank you.
Yes, just to clarify that point, on page 48, it does actually say that over the period of 17 to 20, 2017 to 2020, over that period, 1,500 homes were built. And I think that's against a target of 1,450. So we're 50 over target on, but that's the delivery of all houses. And it's when you then look to the next paragraph below, which then qualifies the situation with regard to affordable. And that's where we run into the deficit situation.
Perhaps we can, Nikki, you can have a look at that paragraph and see if we can better word it for you.
Yeah, yes, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Holiday.
Can I have 2 questions? Can I have 2 questions?
Okay, thank you.
One about affordable. I mean, affordable is quite a broad church, isn't it? Because you've got exception sites in the country. You've got, presumably, you've got the flats in Fakenham for older people, and some of those are much less contentious than others. And it might be quite useful to break it down into, you know, what I call affordable, which is a little group of houses in a country village, versus something in North Walsham or in Fakenham, and they're very different beasts, I think. So that's my view on affordables. Second, can we talk about second homes again? Because this is something that's quite a big issue in my ward, and I know, I think you say it's 11% across the patch, and it's probably 40 to 50% in my villages. And when I questioned at Cabinet what we could do about second home restriction, local occupancy, and other than mitigating it by building more houses, and apparently it's all dealt with at the national level. But actually, there are various ways districts can work on local occupancy. You can do it through local plans, you can do it through neighbourhood plans, you can do it through Section 156 restriction on the further sale of right to buy houses, which actually NNDC says it's doing. And there's a Section 106 agreement they do in national parks to determine local occupancy only for future sales of existing houses. So it's not just new houses. So I wondered what people's views were of actually taking hold of this problem and working on it at a more district level.
Thank you. As for affordable, it's a really tough question, isn't it? What's affordable for one and what's not affordable for the other? But you have to take the demographic, you have to take wages in the area, all those sorts of affordability calculations, and we're given a formula by the government that actually states what affordable is. And I know that we've got our planning policy chairman here. I'm sure he'd be able to help me out on that one. As for second homes, again, it's a policy issue. Now, with the disposables, what happens is there's always a covenant, or there's usually a covenant on those that can only be bought by local people. So that's covered there. But yeah, it's a really tricky one, because I agree. I mean, a certain amount of second homes, they do bring money into the economy, but then again, we need those homes for our local families and local people here. So unless there's a change in the law, I'm not sure what we can do. But again, I really bow to Nikki's greater knowledge of that, and also planning policy. Thank you.
Okay, Officer Debbage.
Well, I'm probably going to bow to the Chair of Planning as well. I mean, I know this has been looked at as part of the development of the merging local plan, and there is the ability to put local restrictions on new homes. My understanding, but I'm very happy to be corrected, is that the decision was made that this wasn't the most effective route, that it would have a knock-on implication, possibly worse, on existing homes, because the controls are only available to us for new homes. Section 157s very much are placed on ex right to buys, meaning that they are restricted to people with a Norfolk 3-year residency or employment history. So we do control right to buy resales.
Do you wish to respond on those points?
So that means we do have a local control, and it's not a national policy issue. And so I think that should be stated. And I think we should, my personal view is that we should look further at what other local controls we could put in. There was that recent case in West Norfolk with the new flats, and I know that the council was the developer, but there are possibilities to do some good. Padstow have just put in a neighbourhood plan control of second homes, and obviously that has had some kickback in St Ives, I understand, but I think it's worth exploring further. And I mean, my view is second homes do bring a lot of wealth into the area. What are less valuable, I think, are holiday homes, where a lot of that money goes offshore and isn't seen, the benefit of it is seen in the area. And there's lots of complexities to it. Some of the houses being bought aren't suitable for living in full time. But there is the impact on services in the winter when people aren't here. So it's a really complex issue, but I do think we should be a little bit more hands-on in the district rather than abdicating responsibility to the national level.
Would there be any merit in having a one-to-one conversation with Officer Debbage, just to kind of go into that a little bit more detail, to give you perhaps a little bit more than we have today?
Okay, as long as I knew there was some output to it and that wasn't just being, I'd like to feel that we were going to view it with a possibility of actually changing our practice rather than just discussing it in theoretical terms.
Okay. Councillor, well, I've got Councillor Withington, Councillor Brown, and Councillor Penfold, and then Councillor Blake. Well, I thought, I'm not going to argue if you're giving way to Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have considered the the issue of restricting second homes in our district in a number of meetings of the Planning Policy Working Party. We have reluctantly come to the conclusion that this is a matter for national control. We have researched extensively into modelling of restrictions locally on second homes in areas like Cornwall, which Councillor Holliday referred to, and this was covered only in a news item on Channel 4 News last week. And the jury is definitely out on whether that is an effective method. Essentially, in places like St Ives, Padstow, places like that, what they've sought to do is to only allow local people to buy new properties in those locations. And all it does is discount the increases in property prices to the existing properties outside the areas allocated for new buildings. So it's not really a solution. The measures that Councillor Holliday is referring to in terms of Section 157 restrictions for local people tend to affect the housing stock, which are currently rented, formerly owned by a local authority and now operated by registered providers. There is a possibility in Section 106 agreements, obviously, to make contributions to building affordable homes on rural exception sites. We've got the national new idea with first homes coming through, where 25% of developments will be for first-time buyers. That's the affordable homes element of developments will be first-time buyers. So we've got national initiatives coming through, but it is extremely difficult. As Officer Nikki Debbage has pointed out, there is no silver bullet solution to the problem that we face as a district council. Believe you me, if there was, we would have discovered it in the working party, and the planning policy team would be trying to bring in the appropriate measures. That may not be extremely helpful. It's the news I have is sort of disappointing, really, in a way. I just wanted to ask Nikki if she could put a figure on the difference or the distinction between right to buy disposals and registered provider disposals in terms of the 81 property deficit to which you referred to, Chairman, on page 48. What is the proportional split? I know that right to buy disposals are reducing because, of course, the numbers are dwindling down year on year. I get that, but it would just be interesting to know what the proportional split is on that figure, if it's possible.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. We do have the figure, but I don't have it off the top of my head. What I can do is send something round later. I think it may be in the depths of the document somewhere, but you're absolutely right that the majority of disposals have been voluntary disposals over the last few years, because the right to buy is only retained by those tenants who were there at the point of transfer. New tenants do not get the right to buy, they get a right to acquire, which is not much of a right, in all honesty. So the right to buy sales have been fairly low, not insignificant, but certainly the minority of the disposals, and we can provide the actual figures to you after the meeting, if that's acceptable.
That's fine. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, just referring to the first part of your point, really, it's an old chestnut. We know that, and we haven't yet found a suitable nutcracker to crack it open effectively. I think we're chipping at the edges, and we may have caused a crack here and there, but we've not opened it up. And if we are able to do so, then that would be a really significant bit of progress. So the challenge is there, there's no doubt about it. Right, Councillor Whittington.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of points I'd like to pull up on, please. In terms of what we've just been talking about and the district being involved in second homes, obviously the North Norfolk Town and Parish Forum is now working closely with the district with our quarterly meetings, and that came about as a result of concerns across the district about the rising number of second homes. The issue that is really at the crux of it is at the moment we have an environment where it's considered everyone has the right to buy a house where they want to. And that's forming the basis of policy. And that's what we've had back from government every single time we've gone back with suggestions about could we. Everyone has the right to buy where they wish to and to develop a business where they wish to. So that, you know, we're fighting against an ethos which is making it much harder. But I think in terms of what we're doing with second homes, I think looking at the way we can mitigate the effects of the high numbers of second homes is probably the way we need to go around it. And I think to some extent this strategy does that, in that it's looking across a broad range of things that we can do. But I think this term affordable is very difficult, and you know, as you've referred to it, it's difficult because the new first home scheme that's coming through, so, you know, talks of a 30% discount. Well, that's still not affordable for someone in North Norfolk, and therefore it's about getting affordable rental properties into the area. And I'm pleased to see that there are lots of all the way across this, you can see that coming through with, you know, trying to develop community land trusts and things. And I know officers, particularly Officer Debbage, has been very proactive on that and going around the parish councils. And I think that's got to be our biggest weapon in a way, really, to encourage it to come from within the community. So although I can see it in there, I would like to see that pulled out a little bit more, so that this emphasis does come on, rather than buying homes through whichever scheme, because they're not achievable for many of our population, that we actually really pull out those bits that are about providing affordable rentals. You know, and we are doing it. We're doing it with our 106 commutations, pulling that money together. We're doing it, you know, with the scheme at Fakenham was incredible. To see that, and I know we want to roll that out, but I don't know whether that comes through strongly enough on this strategy. I know it's in there and I was able to pull it out, but I'd like to see it jumping out of the page a little bit more, because I think, you know, it's a credit, and I think it would be good to see that.
Okay,
thank you.
Do you wish to respond on that?
I totally agree, Councillor Whittington, that we need affordable rented housing, shared ownership, and other schemes at the moment are just way beyond what normal people can afford. So yes, that's our emphasis is on rental. We need more rental housing. Thank you. And Nikki, do you want to take up that point about emphasising that more in the report?
Yeah, I can certainly do that. And I think there's an overlap with the local plan. Clearly, First Homes is a government policy. And as Councillor Brown said, it will be 25% of, well, the government have said it's minimum of 25% of the affordable housing content. We're saying it's a maximum of 25% of the affordable housing content. And 75% of the affordable homes off market-led developments should be affordable rented homes. We're also looking at, as part of the viability review of the emerging local plan, into whether we can look for higher discounts than the minimum of 30%, and potentially we have the ability to go up to a discount of 50%, and also set some local criteria. So perhaps referring back to Councillor Holliday's queries, that's another way of securing local homes.
Thank you. Is it in relation to this point, Councillor Brown?
It is, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the new scheme, the First Homes scheme, does give district councils the discretion to either link the criteria on affordability calculations to either income or local house prices. It's our intention, or it's my understanding, it's our intention through planning policy to link to local incomes rather than house prices to maximise the built out rate of affordables wherever possible in the district. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you for that. I mean, sitting right alongside that challenge of the 25% minimum is that we have to get major developers, and this is down to major developers principally, to actually deliver those schemes. And that, I think, is where the real root of the problem is. We don't build and deliver houses by and large. We allocate land, we facilitate planning and do all of those things. But what we're not able to do is to actually build the bricks and mortar, and we are dependent upon the private sector in that regard in delivering the vast majority of what we need. So let's not underestimate the challenge here. Councillor Penfold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a minor point of clarity on the affordable house target. Just my previous point, I was referring to I think the verbal update, it's not in the report on good old page 48, that we'd built 108, or there are 108 new affordable houses in 2021, and the predicted 183 in 21-22. So that was what I was referring to in there. I just wonder whether it's worth putting those up-to-date stats in this report. I note that this is a summary from a document in 2020, but given that the strategy goes up to 25, it might be worth bringing us just up to date.
Nikki, are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Councillor Blayford.
Yeah, actually, Tim Farron stood up in Parliament last week and made a speech about house clearance. House clearance in national parks, where local people are being forced out of rental accommodation. So this accommodation can be used for Airbnb, etc. And I was just wondering if there's any evidence that this is occurring in our area as well. It picked up a lot of residents from Cornwall. It picked up a lot of residents from, in fact, all national parks, apart from the Broads Forestry National Park, where I seem to have the opposite problem, where I have people living in accommodation that should be for rental and living below the radar as denizens rather than citizens. I find I have 40 elderly people living in accommodation that is not suitable for all year round accommodation. So, as I say, I seem to have the opposite problem, but I'd just be interested if we've any evidence of house clearance.
I'll pass it on to Nikki.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point, and we were asked about this a couple of weeks ago. There was a petition regarding this. It's difficult to say we have complete evidence on this because we've only got half the picture. What we can see is there has been an increase in second and holiday homes again, year on year. And in particular, the rise has been in holiday homes, those that are commercially let. What we can't tell is where the source of those has come from, whether it's owner-occupied homes being sold and used as holiday homes, or whether it is, as potentially suspected, private rented sector homes where tenancies are ending and they are then being used in the future for holiday homes. It's masked at the moment rather because of the pandemic and the end or the kind of ban on evictions. We would normally see, if there's a lot of ending of private rented sector tenancies, people presenting to us as homeless because of the end of those tenancies. And whilst we have seen increases in presentations of homelessness, it's not been for that reason, because of the temporary ban on evictions. So there still could be private rented sector homes changing to holiday homes, but it would be kind of natural turnover rather than eviction. What we really need to see, I think, will be the outcomes from the 2011 census, when we can see what is the size of the private rented sector in North Norfolk and has it decreased. It is below the national average already, and we suspect one of the major causes of that is it is more lucrative to let homes as holiday lets than it is as longer term tenancies, but we don't as yet have the evidence to support that.
Do you wish to add anything to that?
No, that if there's cases, obviously we have the planning enforcement team that we can look at. Thank you.
A good point to watch out for. Thank you. Any other points? Any other questions? No? Are you therefore, I think we're required to recommend that full council approves the housing strategy and action plan.
Yeah, so you're just recommending to full council for approval. Obviously, there has been a number of kind of requests for minor changes, so I suggest that you would probably be recommending subject to amendment.
Right, okay. Are you, can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Brown and Councillor Blaithwaite. And a formal vote. Those in favour? Those, sorry, I didn't, was that a yes or? Councillor Holliday? Abstain, thank you. Right, okay. Thank you very much for that. I'm conscious we've been going for 2 hours. We've got one significant item still, item 14 to consider, and then the work programs. Do you wish for a break at this point just to stretch legs? I suspect we may be going for another half an hour. No? All right, we'll push on then. 14, pre-scrutiny of customer services strategy. Who is the...
We have Sean on the Zoom here to present.
Officer Kelly, do we have a cabinet member or not?
She's not able to attend, unfortunately. Lucy was not.
Okay, and nobody's deputising. Thank you. Over to you then, Officer Kelly.
Chair, members, thanks for your time this morning. What you have before you is the draft customer services strategy. It's a revision of a previously existing document. It is part of the corporate plan to review this strategy and to make it reflect the increased focus on the customer experience when dealing with the council to access all of our services. A number of people have contributed to it, including the previous customer services manager, David Williams, who retired recently. It's with you for scrutiny to allow you to provide comment and shape its final form. The intention is to, we are awaiting, one of the items that's missing from the document is a formal equality impact assessment. And because it is the customer services strategy, we felt it was important to ensure that we got the best quality impact assessment we could. So we've engaged some external expertise to advise us on that. I'm advised that EIA will be with us by the end of next week, at which point I'll share it with you, with the document again with you, with the EIA included. Would anybody like to make any comments now, or I'm happy to receive any input from the committee, from the committee when you have a chance to consider it.
Thank you very much for that. Question. Well, no takers at the moment, but I've got one for you, Officer Kelly.
Yes, Chairman.
Last year, Overview and Scrutiny reviewed the past customer service performance and found that there were several areas of concerns. To what extent have the learning points of the past been reflected in this strategy, and can you give us some examples of those, please?
The strategy defines one of the problems with reliable statistical information in the past has been the wide variety of ways and avenues of communicating with the services that people are accessing. The strategy includes the concept of the one front door. So we actually make sure that people understand the levels of service they can expect to receive on the defined areas of avenues of communication. We have over 300 telephone numbers in the council, some of which are individual, some of which are group, some of which are manned regularly, some of which are not. So what the document, the strategy lays out is the rationalisation of the mechanisms and the improved reporting on the way those mechanisms are used. One of the primary objectives of the strategy, which will be followed by a implementation plan to support the strategy, will be to deliver a much more meaningful set of statistical information in a much more understandable way, so that the levels of service that we offer can be compared with the levels of service that we promise in the customer charter and the customer service standards, which form part of the strategy.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I guess the key follow-up question to that is, to what extent are you confident that our customers are going to understand those service standards when they enter into that contact, if you like?
Yeah, that in parallel to the nature of the statistical reporting, we will ensure it's made available in a way that makes it as, I mean, statistics can always be confusing. We will endeavour, and it's a point that certainly the new customer services manager, Stuart Harbour, is absolutely aware of, is that the information we produce needs to be not only comprehensive, but it needs to be understandable by the target audience. And we will endeavour to do that by using a variety of tools such as infographics, such as clear times, target times and actually achieved times in a single composite way that will allow us to be held to account for our performance against our stated service standards.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's a key element that will drive the number of complaints that will be received ultimately.
One of the follow-on pieces of work to this, which has actually started because we can start the work, is a revision to the complaints policy and process. Again, to make that much more transparent and much more visible and much more universal across the council. So we get an accurate reflection of the number and degree and type of complaints and the way that those complaints can be improved and addressed.
Thank you. Any others?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, support. A couple of observations, if I may. I think it would probably be helpful if some more metrics were actually embedded in the report itself. Because I'm looking through this, the key metrics I was looking for, I find in the appendice on page 117, and I just thought it might be useful to have those more embedded in the document itself, which give something more to measure. The other point I'd just like to understand is any comparison done or analysis done with the digital offering given by other local councils, and how does North Norfolk's compare with that? Thank you.
One of the difficulties in customer service statistics is that people measure different things. We do constantly review how others, particularly our local colleagues, offer their services and the levels of standards they offer. And one way in which we differ from some of our colleagues is that a number of them have, in an attempt to increase the uptake of digital services, have pretty much removed telephone access to a wide variety of services. One of the core themes of our strategy is we are not removing any ways of communicating with us. We will still support telephony, we will still support face-to-face. The way that we're trying to achieve that channel shift is through making the offerings as easy to use as possible and effective as possible, so that people choose to use them rather than have them forced upon them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Withington and Councillor Holiday.
Thank you. I'm interested in, I know during COVID, we moved a lot of different services through to online forms, and we were able to move technology use along more quickly than we perhaps would have done had COVID not occurred. And I know from my experience of working with sharing and community support, that has been really helpful for getting information to people and getting them access to services. I see in the section 2.3 on digital by design, the last paragraph before the summary, there's a brief bit about this, but I do wonder whether we should be flagging that up a little bit more, in that that's the way we want to go. I know, I appreciate what you've just said, we will be still offering telephony, etc. But I think we need to be showing that we really want to move that method of communication forward, and looking to how we can outreach into the community a little bit more with that as well, so that people can access those online services as well. I don't know whether that's worth some consideration.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. We absolutely will. This is the strategy document designed to put in place the framework from which we'll produce a number of action plans and projects to do exactly the sort of thing you're referring to there. One of the elements of that is working much more with our county colleagues, where libraries provide a significant point of access for those that might otherwise be digitally excluded. And we've already made contact with county about how we might make use of that facility in a more structured way, and certainly in our communication to our customers, highlighting the availability of that service as part of that communication is definitely part of that process. We are in a slightly in-between phase at the moment, in that obviously with the national relaxation of the restrictions still in progress, we have been keen recently, and we've regularly altered the messaging on the website and in terms of our releases. So in the height of the pandemic, we were locked down and it was only emergency face-to-face. That message has now been actively softened to say that we are now open for business, we're here to help, but if you can please use the digital services, please do, because A, it's more convenient, and B, it's safer for you as a customer and for staff. And we'll gradually migrate that message to a more business as normal message. But that business as normal won't be back to the old way of doing everything. It will highlight the new facilities and the new ways of interacting with us, and more of those are coming on stream weekly. So it will be a constantly evolving message, but we're absolutely on the need to share that information with our customers and to encourage them to take advantage of it. And certainly any partnership organisations in the towns and parishes that we can engage to help share that message, we'll obviously take advantage of that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holiday.
It's an excellent document. I applaud the intent to use plain English whenever possible, and it's not always noticeable in other documentation and attached to the council. But so what sort of reading age are you aiming at? What sort of, how are you going to achieve that aim?
Well, we have, with the digital content in particular, we have a very competent officer who is now more at the centre of taking output from the subject matter expert services and translating it into a much more understandable plain English version. And we will be increasing the scope of that individual's work. Where we need to, we'll engage specific, as we have done with the EIA, we will engage expertise as and when we think there's a need to do so.
Can I have one more question? Web content, will you be improving it, strengthening it, pari passu with this? Because, for example, I looked up social prescribing the other day because I was interested to hear more about it, and I couldn't find it anywhere on the web. And if you're wanting people to find the information themselves, it would be good to strengthen it.
One of the plans that will come out of this and will drive now is a desire to allow services to produce and maintain their own content much more dynamically, and to add to it, and as importantly, remove obsolete information. There is always a tendency to, once it's on the website, let's forget about it. We are actively working to drive down ownership and responsibility to the services that create the information in the first place, and to transfer that. So the content management system we use is designed to allow people in subject matter expert teams to manage their own content. We are now actively encouraging that and driving that responsibility down into the services. On top of that, we're engaging new monitoring and management tools. So we understand how often content is being updated and accessed, and we use information to engage with services about managing their content directly. Currently, by the way, we are rated as 27th out of all of the councils in England in terms of accessibility on our website. That has improved dramatically recently, and the rate of change won't continue, but hopefully we'll continue to maintain and enhance that position.
Thank you. Councillor Penfold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good point about being in plain English. That's excellent. But just picking up on that, if we have any customers in the district for whom English is not their first language, are we able to cope with that, or provide a service to them that supports and enables them to find what they need to find?
We do. We subscribe to a service called Intran, so that will allow us to provide on-demand variety of language versions of our documents. We also have a contract that will allow in real time access to a translation service. So we can when we receive a contact from a customer, we can engage with Intrans over the telephone, and they will have available a translator of a wide range of languages. I haven't got the list off the top of my head, but it is a significant number of languages.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No? Okay, well, I hope that's given you a bit of feedback that you might want to incorporate, because this is a pre-scrutiny matter, and hopefully that's been helpful to you. I think you've clarified quite a number of issues that we have expressed an interest in. So thank you for that. We're required to review and comment on the draft customer service strategy. I think we have reviewed it. I think we have comments on it. Do you want to take a formal vote, a proposal and a seconder?
No, I think that's fine. You've made the comments clear that you wish to see included.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So unless there's any dissenters, we'll have that, we'll have reviewed and commented on that. Moving on then to item 15, Cabinet Work Programme. Over to you, Matt.
Yep. The main thing to note here is on the Cabinet Work Programme, obviously there is the August break. However, you'll know that many of the financial reports have been pushed from, they should have been in June, they're now going to September. So keeping our eye on those, you'll note that the customer services strategy is due to go to the September meeting as well, subject to those comments you just made. The main thing to note, and I'm not sure if the notice has gone out about this yet, there is an additional cabinet meeting, an urgent cabinet meeting that's being arranged to take place next week to deal with a property transaction. I think it's a bid. Chairman, I think you were consulted on this. I don't know if you have more information than I do at this stage that you can provide at all.
No, I don't think I have much detailed information. Essentially, I will just simply say that I have been properly consulted, and my understanding is that the timescale of the situation warrants or necessitates that cabinet meeting to be made. So I'm accepting of that. Councillor Kershaw, you probably have more detail than mine.
For once. It's actually, the details are now on Modern Dock as a cabinet meeting, and the agenda's there. It's one item, and it's potential sale of a property.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so I don't have any more to add on the cabinet work programme. Actually, there is one thing to say that I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but there is a hope that the cabinet work programme that would kind of run parallel to the scrutiny panels, there is a potential that they might have their first meeting in September, in which case, whatever they review, we would potentially look at that primarily or initially a month after. We might move to a situation where we can have more pre-scrutiny going forward. But just to say that that cabinet work programme is in the process of establishing, and hopefully we'll have those panels come together to address that in the future. I think generally those panels were agreed, and it's up to the group leaders to make appointments to those. So that's just a wait and see really on when that happens.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to the work programme for the committee.
Yep. So there's not too many surprises. As I just said, the financial reports are expected in September, alongside some more routine stuff coming forward. There was I think a request at the last meeting from Councillor Nigel Howson that we move the beach huts and chalet monitoring 1 month later to try and account for all of the kind of extended summer occupancy in that report. And as you can see there, that has been facilitated, so we can expect that in October. So yeah, that's everything I have at this stage.
Okay, any questions? No. Do you want to deal with the actions and outcomes list?
Yeah, just to, there was obviously a lot of recommendations there from the performance monitoring reports. I've only just, and this email came through during the meeting, that I'm going to kind of have an update or feedback from CLT in how they responded to those. So perhaps I can provide a detailed response on that at the next meeting in September, or perhaps even if it would be more helpful to just share that via email.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on that? There's one comment that I have, and that really is just to try and improve, I think, what I will call closing the loop on the number of actions that arise in the minutes. They're not formal recommendations necessarily to Cabinet or to full council or to CLT necessarily, but they are actions, and it's my observation that we are not necessarily picking those up and following those to a conclusion. And what I would like to do, and I have had a discussion with Matt on this, is to run an actions log. And so even though they're not, as I said, formal recommendations on which we've voted, where it is the case that actions have been agreed to be undertaken, which don't, as I said, amount to formal recommendations, I think it is right that we should follow on those and close those loops. So if we run, I think we'll do a little bit of just see what that looks like in terms of a log. It doesn't need to be terribly comprehensive, but I think we do need a method of picking those up and closing those so that we can look back at them and say, yes, that was an action that was agreed by officer, whoever, during this particular meeting, that was delivered on this particular date, and that's all it really needs to be. Now, I think that would help us in monitoring those kind of less formal actions that arise. So unless anybody's got any other proposal, that's what we'd like to try. Okay, thank you. Are you, everybody then, are you content to note the cabinet work programme, the committee work programme and the outcomes and actions list? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, we have no further business and no reason to exclude the public. So that concludes our business for today. Thank you everybody for your contribution and coming along today. I formally close the meeting.